it's time for another What We Read.
Yes, it is.
Slowly but surely catching up on those. We're almost there. Anyway, today's video, I have sort of a theme, and it's basically fantasy and sci-fi. We're just gonna get right into it, and I'm just gonna update you on a couple of things that I've either reread or have continued series that I've already talked about before. So first, we're gonna talk about 3 Guild Hunter books that I completed by the time we're filming this video. We have Archangel's Heart, Archangel's Viper, and Archangel's Prophecy. The only thing I have to say about the series is that I'm still enjoying it tremendously. I think it's so much fun. It's definitely my new favorite like urban fantasy paranormal romance series that I've read. In case you didn't remember what the series was about, the Guild Hunter series centers around a woman named Elena, and she, in the first book, is a Guild Hunter who is tasked by the Archangel of New York to hunt down a very, very, very troublesome person. Things kind of ensue from there. In this world, we have angels, we have vampires, we have a couple of other, you know, sort of mythical creatures that exist. Since the first book, I'm now currently reading the 12th. Since the first book, we have seen the world grow so much. We have met a full cast of characters who I love to pieces, and we have seen romances blossom and terrible things happen and good things happen too. These last 3 books were so much fun to read. Of the 3, I think the most stressful one was the most recent one I read, which was Prophecy, because it is another turning point for the series, and things are happening for Elena and the people she loves, and it is very, very worrisome, especially to someone who cares as deeply as I do. The one that was the most fun to read was probably Viper, just because it's about one of the secondary characters and their romance, and that was really enjoyable. Still highly recommending this series 11 books in. We'll definitely update you on the 12th, and I'm so happy that number 13 is due out in November, so I have something new to look forward to. The next series update I'm going to give you is that I finished the 3rd Wheel of Time book, the Dragon Reborn.
Very impressive. By
Robert Jordan, which I am still kind of shocked that I did it. Like all the other installments in the series, I really enjoyed it. The one sort of weakness in this book, I want to say, is the prologue, which I did not enjoy, but the rest of the book, so good, especially because it's not as primarily focused on the character that was the star of the first 2. So if you don't remember about the Wheel of Time, it is basically about 3 young men, Rand, Matt, and Perrin. They are all from the same town of 2 Rivers, and they're all called Tabaran in the book, which means that fate sort of has a hand on them, and they have a hand in changing fate, whether it's just by something they consciously do or not consciously do. We have seen a lot happen since the first book. There is a dark, looming presence threatening to take over and break the world. There are the good guys, or maybe the good guys. I say that in quotation marks because you don't know if they're good or if they have their own intentions. They're trying to stop the breaking of the world. It's a lot of power plays and court intrigue and journeys and treasures and magic, and it's been so much fun. Like, it's way more fun than I expected it to be, because I'm always intimidated by adult fantasies, and that really does go for the series, which is like 15 books long, but it has been such an enjoyable experience. I'm always impressed by the fact that every book feels like a compelling story to me, no matter what is going on, and I have enjoyed following this entire cast so far. I know that apparently, well, according to a lot of people, there is a dip in the series somewhere in the middle, so I am a little nervous about that, but so far 3 for 3 on books that I have enjoyed in the Wheel of Time series. The last thing I'm going to talk about in this section is a reread that I did in July with my friends DJ and Rachel. I reread Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. I actually didn't read it physically. I listened to the audiobook, which is a recommendation I got from my friend Hannah. It was so good to revisit this story. I had forgotten how much I love this book. Laini Taylor is a master storyteller.
That's lovely.
So Daughter of Smoke and Bone is about a main character named Karu. She is unusual in that she calls Chimera her family in this story. She knows about magic and sort of that side of the world, but also leads a normal everyday life as a university student. One day there's an incident that cuts her off from her Chimera family.
Oh no.
And of course, she's gonna burn down the world to get them back, or to figure out what's happened to them. Cue the arrival of an angel, an unexpected presence in her world, and they're basically the mortal enemies of Chimera, and so Karu is also not a fan. There's just so much to love about this book. First of all, Laini Taylor's writing is still as lyrical as you would expect it to be. It is beautiful. Like, I just love listening to her words being read, because there's just such a nice flow and rhythm to them, and they also paint such detailed pictures of what this world is like, especially because it's set in Prague, and then there's this magical world as well in it. And I also like the way she does her plot, because it's like a slow unfurling until the big reveal drops and you're like, did not see that. Well, I mean, I saw it coming, obviously, because I read the book, but like, I also did not see it coming, you know what I mean? Like, the buildup was just that good, where I was like, oh, it still feels the same. Like, I still feel all this like tension in here that just needs to be released. I also really like her character work. She does a great job with the main characters, who are Karou and Akiva. Karou is obviously our blue-haired heroine, and Akiva is the angel that comes into her life at some point. I really enjoyed her character development for both of them, and also the way that she sort of unfurls the details of their backstories. I also think that in terms of plot, it moves at a very steady pace. Like, it is not quick, this is not a plot-driven story, at least it isn't to me, but the plot is constantly moving forward with every chapter, and I really appreciated that a lot. Oh, I just love this book so much, and I just don't want to read the rest of the series because, like, right now I'm already in a lot of pain, and I just know books 2 and 3 are even more painful. So I'm not here for that quite yet, but I am glad we decided to revisit this one because it was such a beautiful experience. It's been like 6 years since I read it for the first time. Even upon revisiting it, I can tell you this is a 5-star read, and I will highly recommend checking it out if you haven't already.
So, a lot of X-Men still going.
This is the year of X-Men.
This is the year, this is my year for X-Men, I really want to say, because they're finally on top of their game. Not that they weren't, it's just the world wouldn't let them be. And as an international superpower, like as a nation, right? What with them being able to manufacture drugs that will cure Alzheimer's and cancer in exchange for lots and lots of money.
Can they make one that cures COVID? Because that would be great.
You know what? I'm 100% sure that there's some cocoa blossoms that'll be able to cure. I mean, they can cure cancer and cure anything, right? So there is that. And so what has happened and what has transpired in the first set of Dawn of X books, which is basically, you know, Dawn of X 1 to 6, I finally got my grubby little paws on Dawn of X 7, and which is funny because now Marvel Unlimited is sort of catching up to like the release dates of the Dawn of X series. Single issues are finally coming out that are supposedly these collected editions, and I prefer to read them in the collected edition format, mostly because it happens real time, as opposed to like, I just want to read all things X-Men, I just want to read all things Excalibur.
Gotcha.
And because at the same time, it gives you a nice little narrative overview of what's happening in all parts of the world. So you've got the X-Men, which is sort of like the core, the heart of what's going on in Krakoa, which centers around the Summers family sometimes. You've got your New Mutants.
Sometimes.
You've got your New Mutants, which is the younger sort of like, you know, set of students, sort of like the next class, or really
next gen.
Yeah, thereabouts. And you haven't heard of them from in a while. To have them sort of, you know, they're, you know, buggering off to space and then back, and lots of shenanigans, especially with Robert DaCosta, Sunspot being sort of like the Deadpoolish character, a very I am the center of everything kind of thing. So there's that.
Of course, there's always a character,
right? You've got Excalibur, which is sort of like the mystical side of things, where Betsy Braddock, who formerly Psylocke, finally got her body with her purple hair back, is now Captain Britain. And therefore is in charge of all of the otherworldly stuff that's happening in the UK. And of course X-Force, which is still basically the CIA of the X-Men, right? Beast is heading it. On the front lines, you've got Wolverine and Jean, like, you know, just it's really insane. So where are we with this? So X-Force follows Domino, who was abducted in the previous sort of like 6 books. Her genes were grafted onto a bunch of assassins, making her luck quotient sort of go down. And as she offs the, you know, said assassins one by one, her luck starts to build up. So that's a really crazy arc that they had. They subvert that somewhere because I've read a little bit of ahead, and so I'm really interested to see where they're going to take Domino. I think she's one of the most interesting, even underrated characters in the entire X sort of universe. She's had her books over time, but to have her front row center this way is really, really cool. Marauders follows the black market and how the X-Men are controlling that, because they absolutely know that on the proper markets, their drugs will be their drugs, but on the black market, their drugs will be trafficked as well. And so they have the Hellfire Club, or whatever passes for it, controlling that as well, with Kitty as the Red Queen. A new position, because you had the Black King, the Black Queen, still Emma Frost and Sebastian Shaw, and then they created a spot for Kitty. And her job is basically to not legally transport all of the mutants from across the globe back to Krakoa if their governments are preventing them from coming through the portals. Terrible things have happened to the crew of the Marauder, and this is the aftermath of that and how they're gonna get back up and see how it goes and get all of that court. This is the most court intrigue of them all, and I'm loving the fuck out of it. Apparently the only times I like court intrigue are if they involve fallen angels that decide to breed on Earth.
Push L, in case you're wondering.
In case you're wondering. Dragons and mutants. Who knew? And of course Wolverine, because why not another Wolverine book? Sure. He's their Superman, I guess, you know, or Batman. He's always there. Actually, technically, no. Wolverine is technically the Marvel Universe's Batman analog, in that it's always about him. He's the best at what he does, and he adopts a bunch of kids growing up. I don't know any like Carol has not adopted anybody. Steve certainly just had the one Bucky, and then that's it. And yet Wolverine is the only one who has like Kitty and Jubilee and you know, Armor, and
has been saddled with children
and actual children with Ken and Laura, and now, you know, my baby's back. Oh, Honey Badger is back in the comics. I'm so happy. It's a little bit ahead of Dawn of X7. But what I do want to, like, if you're going to read Dawn of X at all, there's a one standalone book which focuses on a depowered sibling of the Guthrie family, because that was a thing that still happened in this timeline where the big bad Scarlet Witch said no more mutants, and about everyone was depowered except for 198 mutants. Some of them got their powers back magically, I don't know how. Sure. But some of them didn't. In that particular issue, X-Men, I want to think that was X-Men 7 or whatever, anyway, is Crucible Day. It is when a mutant, because they can be reborn now, is when a mutant with no more powers goes through a crucible where they will fight for their lives and die so that they can be reborn with their powers back. And it is this terrible, terrible gauntlet, and Apocalypse is obviously at the center of it, even if he's only really just seen in the arena. And that's the plot of it. It's, you know, the council has decided that the first ever crucible will be handed over to Arrow, who was the, you know, that was her mutant name, and she says to her siblings, you know, like, let's do this. And so the Guthries are there. Guthrie, I'm butchering that, like, up, down, left, and right here. But the entire clan, because they're a powerful mutant family, they're all there in the stands, and she's getting the crap kicked out of her. Sure. Because that's the point. And it's this whole show of strength where, and there's this philosophical conversation between Scott and Kurt, Nightcrawler and Psycho, about what does this mean for us? And Kurt's like, I don't know, man. Krakoa's like child, and Kurt is Christian. Like he's I think he's specifically Catholic.
Yeah, I think so too.
And in the old X-Mansion, they really honored, like, you know, the X-Men have diverse faiths. Kitty's Jewish. I want to say Soraya is Muslim, and Kurt had his own little chapel. But now with everybody getting reborn and shtick, and he's like, I think we need to create a religion around this now, because we can't just use the old rules. Philosophical stuff aside, it's one of the most beautiful X stories sort of written, because that is what you do if there is a rebirth process. And to see, you know, Arrow's sort of re-transcendence, I guess, or whatever you want to call it, is pretty cool. Two things to mention as I close my thing off. X-Men Fantastic Four. Franklin Richards, Reed and Sue's eldest son, is one of the most powerful mutants ever. And for whatever reason, his mutant powers aren't working. Reed has tried to cure him. There's a weird, terrible allusion to how Reed can't cure the people that he loves the most, Kello Ben. And that's terrible, right? It stabs a lot of nerves until, you know, the offer is made, let Franklin come home to Krakoa. And Sue was like, what do you mean home? You know what I mean? Like, it's just basically, like, you did not just say, like, this was not, like, you didn't, so there was a lot of you did not justs on both sides. Like, you did not just say Franklin shouldn't be home here. Yeah. And the mutants are like, you did not just invade our island. This whole time, Kitty and Franklin, who have been friends for a while, like, they've got that kind of fun wine-aunt relationship. I don't know. That's my headcanon. You interpret it however you want when you read it. But if you're hearing it here, Kate Pryde is the wine aunt, and Franklin's like the nephew. They were actually on their own adventures and doing their own thing. And nobody knows where they were. And then Doom is involved. And it's just a story of, well, what will the Richardses do now that there is a huge overlap between Franklin's destiny and Krakoa. And it's great. Everybody's on fine form. Everybody is on brand. Magnificently on brand. So that was a fun book to read. If you like Fantastic Four shenanigans, if you like the X-Men, this is just beautiful. Lastly, I'm just gonna put it up here for everybody to see. This is issue 1 of Fushigi Yugi Byakko Senki. It is a tale set in a universe where there is another universe that people from our world go into. And if you are a fated maiden who will be the future priestess of a particular one of the 4 gods of sky and earth, living in that world, you could potentially be transported from here to there, have the power to summon that god, and change the lives of everybody in that kingdom forever. The Fushigi Yugi series occurs in present times, focuses on 2 friends who eventually wound up in the same book on opposite sides of 2 warring countries, trying to summon their gods individually, and in the process finding, like, well, on Miyaka's side, the main character, 7 new friends that'll love you forever and be tied to your heart in a million different ways. Lord.
I like how he makes it sound like it's this joyful journey. It's not.
It's not. It's like the worst thing ever. It's great. It's great. At the time that Miyaka and Yui are transported to this world, history has had it that there have been 2 other priestesses that have come from our world to theirs, and their journeys sort of intertwine with Miyako and Yui's because they needed the tools that they used to summon their specific gods in the very, very far past in that universe. But here it was just a span of decades since they went. So after that wrapped up, Iwatase created the Genbu Kaiden, which is the first priestess to ever come back. So you've got Suzaku and Seiryu in the first real series, and you've got the first lady, the priestess of Genbu, which is the first prequel. This is the middle book, focusing on how the Byakko side of things sort of happened. Byakko's like the tiger god, and it centers around a tiny little girl named Suzuno. Years after, you know, Takiko had traveled and gone back to the book and done her thing and did her time. This is her story. Now, Suzuno happens to be my favorite ship of the entire Fushigi series because in the main story, they actually still meet some living Star Warriors of Byakko. They do. One of which had a spell cast on him that he lived forever, basically, and his name was Tatara. He was the one who had fallen in love with Suzuno, as told in the story, right? So that's not too much of a spoiler, and gave Miyako some hope because she had fallen in love with her Star Warrior. And he tells her that, you know, I don't think it's gonna work. I mean, look at me. And they realized that, you know, for years, even if Suzuno had come back to this earth, they were just happy, and it was this thing, and it was terrible. So I'm reading this thing shaking, right? Just like the whole time. Just, you know, palpitating, like just hyperventilating the entire time, just like breathing into a paper bag, page after page. And then I see the familiar characters, and then it stops me cold. The only spoiler I'm gonna reveal, of course, in the lore, you only find out you're a Star Warrior when your powers activate. She comes into this world and meets 2 brothers, both of which suspiciously look like Tatara. And of course they have different names. Because Tatara is a Star Warrior name.
I'm enjoying this trauma,
and
you guys know.
And I'm like, which one of you is it? And so I'm just like in vain, like...
The best part is it's only volume 1. I have made the wise choice to wait until we have more volumes. So this one, on the other hand,
is a moron. So effectively, like it's legally documented somewhere. And so it's just really painful. Look at him, looks exactly like him. So I'm assuming that's him, but I don't know. There's 2 brothers, 2! So if this is gonna be a triangle, again, I can't. This is the worst triangle. Like, there wasn't even a real triangle.
It wasn't really a triangle,
anything. But if this is it, if she pulls the triangle trope now, God,
can you
what
sense the bitterness?
I am so, it's like, isn't it, this is like coffee right here. Just a lot of, like, just need some
sugar.
I'm done. It's hurting.
Okay.
Anybody else feel the same? No, just, okay.
On that note, I am going to talk about a few other books. I'm going to start with the one that's not a 2020 release, and that book is The Rise of Kyoshi.
There you go.
Which is by FCE.
FCE!
Co-creator Michael Dante de Martino. This is the first of the 2 books in the Kyoshi series. It basically gives people who love Avatar: The Last Airbender a chance to see how Avatar Kyoshi became Avatar Kyoshi. The best thing about this book is that FCE captures the spirit of Avatar: The Last Airbender so well. Specifically Avatar: The Last Airbender, not Korra. So he captures the spirit of that world so well. He uses a lot of the elements in it, not just the different kinds of bending and the different nations, but he also just takes a couple of details here and there that are super fun to encounter in the story.
Yep.
But what I think he did best is that he gave us an Avatar, sort of like a making the Avatar journey that's different from what Aang's experience was and what Korra's experience is like. That takes a lot of hard work because you want there to be enough similarity so you're like, oh, it's like you're seeing the Avatar become the Avatar.
Yeah.
But you also want to make it different enough that Kyoshi will stand out in your mind because her journey is so different from the other 2.
Like for there to be a compelling pattern without it looking like it was contrived.
Correct. And he did that extremely well. I was very entertained by this story. I honestly didn't know what to expect out of Kyoshi's story, and I was very surprised at the direction that they took at the beginning. What I know of Avatar Kyoshi didn't line up with how I first meet Kyoshi in this book. So I was like a little thrown. He has really told the story in a way where it makes sense and pieces are starting to fall into place. I will say that I do think that this deserves an animated version because I can just see so much of this being animated so well, and I want to see it because I've experienced so much of Avatar in a visual way, whether it's watching the actual series or reading the graphic novels. It was a little bit disconcerting to be actually reading text that told an Avatar story. Like, it was a little odd and a little off-putting, and that's part of the reason, I guess, that I didn't necessarily like 5-star favorite love this one as much as I love like the graphic novels or the show itself. But if you are an Avatar: The Last Airbender fan, you're definitely going to want to see how Kyoshi becomes the formidable Avatar you meet in season 1, I want to say, of Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Yeah, I think it was season 1. Yeah. Well, probably 2.
It was either 1 or 2. And you also get to meet all of her Team Avatar, which is very fun.
That's like for me, I wasn't too interested in sort of reading this because I did not know what to expect. But to understand that pattern that she does have her own team Avatar.
She has her own Team Avatar.
I'm like, okay, let's get me some of that.
She got a team.
Because let's not forget the first time we see Kyoshi, and by the way, you mentioning that Kyoshi like being like subverts it.
Also, you get to find out why Kyoshi dresses like this.
I want that too.
Yeah,
like, there's
you get to find out why her outfit is like this, why she has the fans. Like, you get to find out a lot of stuff, cool. And it's pretty great. Like, FCE did a really good job. So I am looking forward to reading the sequel, which came out a couple of months ago. Definitely curious to see how he wraps it up. I'm assuming it lines up exactly with how we have first encountered Kyoshi as an Avatar, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. Now we're going to talk about a couple of new 2020 releases. So first is going to be A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. And this is so reflective, so we're gonna put it down for now. A Deadly Education is the new book that's first in her new series, and it is set at the Scholomance. It is a school for people with magic.
Magic
Except
school,
that at this school there are no teachers, and you're basically learning on your own, and you also have to survive all the pitfalls and perils that the school has, because the school itself is actively trying to get rid of you. That's on top of all your classmates also trying to get the upper hand on you. The main character in this book is named Galadriel, Elle for short. She will totally survive her time at the Scholomance unless she gets unlucky, because she has a very specific and very powerful dark ability that may just endanger the rest of her classmates. But anyway, we're basically following her in a year in her life at the Scholomance, including the allies and enemies she makes and the things she discovers that are the secrets of the Scholomance. The beginning of this one was a little slow for me. There's a lot of information thrown at you all at once, and it is written in a way that's very different from the 2 other Naomi Novik books I read, which are Uprooted and Spinning Silver. I was somehow expecting this to be sort of very high fantasy medieval, but it's not. It's actually very modern. It's set in like the modern times. Like,
cool.
I could actually imagine that the Scholomance exists somewhere and I just don't know it because I am not magically gifted or anything like that. It's a fascinating world once you sort of get the hang of what's going on and like figure out the circumstances that Elle is living in, but it took time to get there. It's very weirdly slice of life, but with a dark undertone. So like,
I'd watch that anime.
So you're basically following Elle in her school year, right? Like I said, except that she has to overcome all the challenges the school and her classmates are presenting to her. And that means she has to be smart about her approaches, about her alliances, and about like the things she decides to learn. At the same time, you get all these really dark and terrible things happening. People die in this, like people have terrible injuries in it, and there are like scary monsters and difficult powers, and I'm just like, and people are mean in this book too, and I'm just here and I'm like, this is such a weird contrast of things, because it's like, this is what happens the next day at the Scholomance. Also, there's this gigantic creature that could probably lop your head off, and you just gotta survive it. It's very odd. Terrible. It's like a weird mix of things, and yet it somehow worked. The plot definitely starts picking up towards the second third of the book, and the last third is the most exciting, which is not too surprising, I'd like to say, but I am curious because I didn't think that it was going to finish out the entire school year in one book, but that's essentially what happens here, and I am very curious to see what happens next. Elle has, I think, a year more left of school at the Scholomance, so I'm assuming that's what book 2 is going to be about. But yeah, so slow build. I was close to being like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to like this for the first half, but then the second half got me, so would still recommend checking it out, with the caveat that it is a slow starter, slow burn, but it is kind of worth it in the end, especially if you like that whole weird conflicting elements that somehow magically work together. It's funny because I could have entitled this entire section like books that Maki should be reading, because there's Rise of Kyoshi, right? And then A Deadly Education, which I think you'll enjoy.
Yeah, like
the next book is a Marie-Lu book, and that's Skyhunter.
All right.
This is the pretty finished edition of it. It's got Skyhunter written here on the side. It's got, I'm just going to show it off, even though this is not a book haul. It's got this beautiful, like, under the dust jacket thing. I actually listened to this one thanks to LaRue FM again, and the audiobook was great.
Superb.
So Skyhunter is her new science fiction dystopian series starter. It's set in a place called Mara, and Mara is one of the last actually it is the last independent nation that hasn't been taken over yet. In Mara, there is a group of people called strikers, and they're the ones who are sent to defend the border against these sort of super soldier, like scientifically enhanced creatures that come. Talon is our main character. She does not have the ability to speak, so she signs instead of speaking, which is something that already made her stand out in my mind. The inciting incident of this book is that Mara's partner in the striker, because she is a striker team in the strikers, dies, and she gains a new partner who just so happens to be a hostage from the conquering kingdom.
Oh, that's
Things
interesting.
Get a little complicated.
I like that.
These two end up working together because there are bad things afoot, and I'll leave it at that. I'm not always a dystopian reader, but for some reason I kept picturing this one as an anime. There's just something about it that reminds me of like Attack on Titan a little bit, maybe a little bit of Full Metal Alchemist too. She has a lot of underlying aspects to it that you sort of expect if you've read her Legend series, but also she does it in a way that feels very refreshing in this story.
Very cool.
I like the whole concept again of like seeing people band together in an effort to stay independent and to fight for what they think is right against this conquering power that has basically just wiped out and taken over everything out of greed. It's just so interesting. So many questions get brought up. What is the right course of action for this? Can you feel sympathy for a country or for the people in a country that has been conquering methodically one by one the places that were once free? Do you blame just the leaders? Do you have to blame every single one involved? Can you ever come to an understanding of someone who is on the opposite side of you? And that's obviously a main question, considering Talon gets paired with this guy who is a hostage from the other side. It has a solid plot and there's a lot of action scenes. That's something I think MariLou does incorporate in most of her work. Yeah. Maybe not so much Kingdom of Back because that's a whole different kind of genre and story, but like everything else I've read from her, there's always like those intense like moments of action and battle scenes, and she does a good job with it. Yeah. And like everything you've read from her as well, like Warcross and Wildcard have great action scenes. Her Legend series also does, and so does this one. I also really enjoyed getting to know the cast. I really liked Talon from the start. I think there was just something about her that felt so easy to like, even though she's also very guarded and closed off. Like you can genuinely tell despite that what she wants is the best for her loved ones, the best for her country, and she believes that she can contribute best by being a striker. If you've read enough dystopian science fiction stories, especially in YA, or if you've watched a lot of them, you might be able to guess at the plot twists and turns. I mean, I know I did, but it was still enjoyable in the telling. And I think that's where MariLou's gift lies. I feel like I never have to worry about, you know, things dragging in Marie's books, at least of the ones I have read, because she just knows how to do her pacing and storytelling so well. I will also give a shout out to the audiobook narrator. Her name is Natalie Nadas. She did a really stellar job narrating this book, and you could tell that she put a lot of thought into how she wanted the characters to sound and how she wanted the narrative voice to come across, and I think personally I really enjoyed her take on it, so would highly recommend checking this one out if you are a MariLou fan or if you're new to Marie stuff and you are interested in a new sci-fi dystopian sort of YA story. Definitely check out Skyhunter. Last but certainly not least
in the series of things that I should read,
yes, is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E.
Here
Schwab,
we go.
which we are also going to put down because it's very reflective. The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab is the story of a girl who was alive in 1714 and is determined to stay free and not get tied down, and so she makes a deal with a god, one of the gods that comes out after dark, to, you know, win her freedom. And instead she is granted the gift of immortality that comes at a price, and the price is that the people she encounters, once she is out of their sight, they no longer remember her. The big inciting incident in this book is that it's 300 or so years later, I want to say, and Addie meets a young man named Henry, and he is the first person who remembers her, and things kind of go from there.
That's insane already.
This story is just, it's so hard for me to talk about it because I have so many thoughts and a lot of them were spoilery, but I will say it is fascinating to see how V.E. Schwab kind of teases out the story, the history behind Addie's deal, and sort of like her experiences leading up to the present day where she meets Henry. And it's also equally fascinating to find out the backstory for Henry too, which we do get in the book. I love that she's able to give us these different highlights of Addie's, well, I shouldn't say highlights because not all of them have good things happening, but like we get so many pieces of Addie's story, and it is up to us to sort of put together a picture of what her character is like. Because actually, now that I think about it, and this only just occurred to me, the fact is, it's sort of like we're getting these snapshots of Addie, and we're trying to cling so hard to who she is and who we think she should be that we have to assemble that based on the pieces we're given. And I like that a lot. I thought that was very smart. The construction of the story is interesting because it bounces around in timeline. So you got present stuff, you've got past stuff. And it kind of goes around from there, and there's a variety of settings as well. I would have liked more of a sense of place with each of the settings, because we've got New York, we've got Paris, there's Venice, there's this whole like variety of settings, and you kind of get a taste for each. New York is probably the most well-developed one because a lot of the story takes place there. I think the story is just magical, from its construction to the storytelling to the character work. I think V. Schwab has done something very special with this book. It is definitely my favorite so far of all the things I've ever read from her. Just the way the story builds and builds and builds, and then you get to that ending and it just pays off so well, and I really like that a lot. There are a few things that maybe, like in hindsight, after like coming down from the high of reading it, that I was like, oh, this could have been a little more teased out or developed. Like I said, I would have liked a bigger sense of place, but overall, like with what we've been given, it's so special, and I feel like rereading it will be an entirely interesting experience, because you kind of know and you can see more hints of like things that she sort of dropped in at the beginning that you might not have noticed the first time. So I think it's one of those books that you can go back to and just re-experience, and it will be different the next time you do. Combining her great writing with her character work, her storytelling, this narrative, and the entire like lore of the story, it's a really good combination. And I know a lot of people have hyped this story up, but personally I definitely enjoyed it a whole lot. Also, I will warn that you have to be prepared, because Addie isn't necessarily the most likable character. You spend so much time in her head and with her that you kind of get to see like the things that are not so great about her, but that's also part of the story, and you kind of see how that affects everything in the future because of the different choices she makes. I'll also warn you that there's a lot of like heavy stuff in there too. We've got some depression, there's sexual violence, there's a bunch of things in here that obviously you should be very careful with, but it's just so good. As someone who enjoys stories within stories within stories, I think that this is a stellar example of that. Oh, you guys know I don't annotate much, but look, I annotated this book so much.
I'm excited
to so many thoughts.
I'm actually honestly more excited to read the annotations than I am the actual
It's really
book.
great. Anyway, those are all the books that we have to talk about in this particular What We Read. We hope you enjoyed it. Let us know if you read any of these books, if you're excited for any of them. We would love to hear.
Holler at us.
And we will see you guys with another video soon.
Bye.